When all of the housing markets across the United States and really across the world started to explode, it became clear after about a year or so that Florida was the clear winner when it comes to how high housing prices were going, and they just seem to never slow down. In fact, there's still many areas across Florida where home prices are still on the rise, even by double-digit percentages. However, inventory throughout the state of Florida is absolutely exploding. In fact, when you look at a map of the United States and the inventory levels on the ReVenture app, you don't see anywhere else that even comes close to the state of Florida in terms of how much inventory has been added to the market year over year. And right now, Florida has seen a 35% increase in its overall inventory in just 1 year. And that is far beyond even the close distant seconds of Louisiana and Mississippi, where they have about 28 and 26% year over year inventory growth. So it's not even close. I'll get into some reasons later in this video of why I think this is happening. But Florida is clearly showing signs things are going to probably come down just as fast as they went up. But if you really want to know which areas of Florida are going to see the biggest price declines, you kind of have to be more granular. You have to break things down even further. And the first thing I'm looking at is where in Florida is actually the inventory rising the most. And so when we break it down into different metros areas in the state of Florida, we can see that there are no metros in Florida that are shaded blue, unlike other areas throughout the country where inventory is actually still decreasing year over year. You can see clearly on the map here that there are places throughout the country that are still having an inventory shortage. Things are still going down in terms of how many available listings are on the market. But when we look at the state of Florida, there's not a single metro in Florida that meets that criteria. Everywhere today has more inventory today than there was 1 year ago. And so what this map shows you is that there's really just different shades of red. And what this red represents is the redder it is, the more inventory growth there has been year over year, and the lighter it is, then the less inventory growth. But what has all this inventory growth actually done to home prices here in Florida? Because one thing that we've been told nonstop is that the reason why home prices are so high is because there's an inventory shortage. And while that is true, there is a shortage of listings, not actual homes in the country. There is a shortage of available listings right now. That's starting to reverse here in the state of Florida. So how is that affecting prices here? Well, believe it or not, it hasn't been affecting prices all that much yet. Yet is the big keyword here, because while there are areas that are seeing price declines where the inventory is exploding the most, it hasn't been major drops like a lot of people have probably been hoping for. And I think that's mainly due to the fact that sellers are always behind the curve when it comes to the housing market. No matter what's happening, whether the market's going up or down, it doesn't matter. Sellers are always the last ones to realize what's happening in their local market, okay? And what I believe we're seeing right now is a lot of sellers are pricing their homes as if there is still an inventory shortage, especially in these areas where there is no inventory shortage. What this is going to do is they're going to start seeing more and more inventory continue to pile up because of so many sellers not really getting with the program and pricing these properties appropriately to sell. And as more inventory builds, it will put more price pressure on the existing inventory to have prices come down even further. And ultimately what's going to happen is it's going to be a waiting game. You're going to have a bunch of sellers sitting on the market and thinking, well, you know, I can keep my price high. I can just wait for a buyer to come along. So whoever can essentially afford to waste and lose the most money is who can keep their price highest for longest. But that high price doesn't really do you any good if you can't actually get that price. If comps in your neighborhood are now selling for less than what you're asking, it's a losing battle no matter how much money you have to sit and wait this out. Well, let's do a little digging with prices and see what's going on here. So let's zoom in on the Miami metro, because obviously I live here and we talk a lot about Miami because I'm here. And what you can see is that even though inventory has gone up in Miami, it still hasn't gone up enough to bring a drag on prices, okay? Especially since Miami is probably the most popular place in Florida where people from all over the world move to. So here, we're still seeing a 6.5% increase in prices year over year. However, if we go to the west side of the state and go to Southwest Florida, where inventories are exploding the most, in some cases over 100% inventory growth year over year, we can see it is starting to have an impact on prices in places like Sarasota and Bradenton, over in Northport, over in Cape Coral and Fort Myers. These areas are starting to see prices come down anywhere between 1 and 3% right now. And I know most of you are going to say, that's not enough, Michael. And I agree, it's not enough. But what you're seeing is things are starting to move in the direction that we've been talking about for a very long time now. Once the market starts to come back to an equilibrium where we're starting to see a regular amount of inventory on the market, it's going to have an impact on pricing. And these Southwest Florida markets are the first ones that are seeing this right now. Here we have a waterfront house for rent that can be yours for only $24,000 a month. And it's another hot potato property that has sold 3 times in the last 6 years for $1.1 million, then $2.6 million, then almost $2.8 million. And then they most recently listed it for rent just a few days ago for $20,000 and thought, hey, it's not renting, let's raise the price $4,000. That must be a great idea. Meanwhile, you got a property tax bill to pay of $34,500 per year. One other notable area of price declines when looking at the map of Florida here is the Villages. Right now the Villages is seeing a 3.2% year over year price decline due to all the extra inventory on the market over there, which is going to be great for all the retirees that move into this area since this is a huge retirement destination in Florida. But like I said, guys, it's not really big price declines. You know, we're talking like in the Villages, for example, going from $407,000 for a median price home to $394,000. Another example is, you know, going from $361,000 down to $350,000. So these prices are still very high, and when you combine it with a 7% mortgage rate, no matter which way you slice it, it's unaffordable. And that's the reason why you're going to continue seeing these prices come down as more and more inventory builds, because people cannot hang on to empty real estate forever. Even if they're living in the home, if they listed it for sale, there's a good chance there's a strong reason why they need to sell. Most people don't just sell just to sell. They have a reason behind it, whether it's a job, it's a divorce, it's a birth. Some sort of life event is usually the main driver of why someone will list their home for sale. So even if they're still living in the home, there's usually a sense of urgency that, hey, we need to get this house sold within a few months. But you got to understand that people cannot afford to sit on empty homes forever, guys. Now, obviously, if somebody has enough money to own a couple of empty homes, then they can probably afford to leave it like that for quite some time in hopes of trying to get the price that they want. But if they actually have any real motivation to get rid of the property, they will lower the price to the appropriate number when push comes to shove. But some sellers, you know, they just take longer. Some people just don't get the picture fast enough, unfortunately. So it is good news that we're seeing the prices come down in areas where inventory is exploding. And I think that on this trajectory, in a couple more years from now, you could see a lot more inventory in Florida, and you're going to get to points where, you know, prices will come down by 10, 15%, maybe more by then, depending on the conditions of the overall economy. But you have to also look at, why are all these houses going up for sale, guys? And I can guarantee you that the number one reason so many of these houses are going up for sale is because of the massive increases in homeowners insurance, something we have talked about dozens of times here on the channel. This is severely impacting the cost of ownership here in Florida. But it gets worse because when you combine it with high property taxes because of these high real estate valuations, and if you live in an HOA community, those dues exploding as well, it is just unaffordable. You know, people cannot afford to maintain homes at these prices anymore. So you have to look at it like this, like it's not just the fact that inventory is exploding that's going to have a downward pressure on prices, but also the cost of ownership on these homes has gone up so high, that's going to have to play into the future price as well. Because we know that a lot of people just can't afford houses at today's prices, but even if they could, guys, even if let's say everybody had the income to buy at today's prices, there's a high probability that a lot of those people still wouldn't be able to afford to pay the ongoing maintenance and expenses and insurance and taxes on these homes once they actually buy it, okay? We're looking at just, okay, can they afford the initial down payment and initial monthly payment of the house without factoring in any of these explosive increases of anything else? So you need to understand that those increases are definitely going to play a role in what prices are going to have to be in the future. But I think this is overall going to be good news for people that have like kind of given up on the dream of owning a property in Florida, and it's not going to change overnight, guys. And I think there's a high probability that we still might never see prices come down to where they were pre-pandemic, but they probably will get a whole lot more affordable over the next few years. You have to be ready to say like, okay, well, I'm fine paying 20% less than what the cost of the home is today, but recognizing that your expenses to maintain the home are going to be very high moving forward due to the higher insurance, property taxes, and HOA fees. But you can get even more granular with this data. Like for example, if you break it down into the zip codes of a certain metro, and we'll go back to Miami where I live here, you can see that areas inland like Hialeah and Little Havana and Little Haiti, all these places are still seeing big year-over-year price increases around 10 or 12% in some cases, because the homes in those areas are still very affordable compared to the rest of Miami. So there's still a lot of room for growth in those areas. Versus if you take a look at over by the beach where I live, home prices have essentially gone flat. They're not really going up anymore at all because it's already gotten so high over here that it's kind of like hit the ceiling. There's really no more room for growth at this point. So you're not going to see a whole lot of appreciation moving forward, is my opinion on what's going to happen with that. And then if you go and zoom in on an area like Southwest Florida, in the Sarasota, Bradenton area, for example, you're seeing price declines in almost all of the counties there, but there are still a few areas that are holding out, that are still in the orange area where you're seeing prices still go up. And it's typically in the more affordable areas, guys. The places that are coming down right now are the places that have just gotten so far out of whack that the pricing is unsustainable. Now, yet another factor that will have downward price pressures for the state of Florida are the price of rent. Because in fact, Florida is also the state that has seen the highest decline in rent prices year over year in 2023 compared to other states. We saw a whopping 9.21% decline in rent prices on average statewide, guys. That's pretty huge, okay? So like I said, things went up so fast here and it's starting to come down just as fast. But there's no doubt it's still high, just like home prices, right? The average rent in Florida is still at about $2,100 a month, and the national median is about $1,964. So it's still more expensive than what you could expect to pay on average in different parts of the country. And in places like Jacksonville, for example, rents are actually still going up. You have a 7.62% increase in rents last year versus down here in Miami, where rents literally doubled or even tripled in some cases for some people. I've seen some absolutely insane things happen here. Rent prices here are down on average about 7.67%. And I notice it, guys. I see it here a lot. I show you guys all these listings I come across, you know, houses, places for rent, and you know, a lot of times they're having to drop the rent back down to where it was in 2021 just to get the place rented, or even 2020 prices. You know, forget about the 2022 and 2023 rent prices. Those days are over. Tampa as well, they've seen a 2.5% decline in rent prices year over year. And once again, is that enough to really rock the boat? Not yet, guys, but things are headed in the right direction. But Florida's also benefiting from this huge multifamily rental construction boom that we're seeing, where nationwide there's about 1 million new units being delivered between last year and this next 12 to 18 months. So you're seeing a lot of those units go up here in the state of Florida. And I kind of touched on homeowners insurance a little bit earlier and the impact that I think this is going to have on home prices here. And this is just yet another data point to back up my claim, guys, because in Florida, if you have Citizens homeowners insurance beginning January 1st of this year, you're required to have flood insurance if the replacement cost of the house is $600,000 or more. But they have a tiered system where every year moving forward, they're going to continue to force more and more people to have flood insurance, whether or not you're in a floodplain. Even if this house right here is 30 feet above sea level, they don't care. If you have a Citizens policy, you have to get flood insurance. So starting in 2025, the replacement value cost goes down to $500,000. Starting in 2026, it goes down to $400,000. And starting in 2027, it will go down to every single property insured with Citizens will be forced to have flood insurance. Now, I'm assuming that they're referring only to single family homes here. It doesn't say, but it doesn't make any sense for it to apply to condos, because condos will already have their own flood insurance anyways with the master insurance policy in many cases. So it probably won't apply to individual condo unit owners, but it will apply to the condo association as a whole, which if your condo doesn't have it now, it will make HOA fees go up even higher in the future. But here's the problem, guys. Not only does this make owning the home more expensive, but in the mortgage world, what this does is it increases the buyer's debt to income ratio, which makes the home less affordable. This basically can push somebody from being approved to being denied if you're already on the edge of affordability to begin with. And honestly, as a resident here, I think all of this is a good thing in terms of things are going to have to get back to reality. I'm not thinking it's a good thing that we're seeing all these major increases in insurance and all this, because you guys know I think all this stuff is a ripoff. However, because of that, it will force prices to come back down to earth, because people will just not be able to continue paying all these expenses indefinitely and keep these home prices where they're at. And you're already starting to see, like I showed you, different pockets where prices are starting to fall due to the explosion in inventory. And when you combine this explosion in inventory with all these increased expenses, you can just expect more of the same over the next several years. Now, if you bought a home in Florida anytime in 2023 and it's your primary residence, in case you haven't done so already, you have only until March 1st, which is only a few more days from now, to file for your homestead exemption. And the reason why you want to do this is because it saves you money on your property taxes. Not nearly as much as you would like to have saved, which I made a full video about this a couple weeks ago, showing you guys that even with a homestead exemption, your property taxes can still jump by a pretty large amount. And I'll give a quick refresher on that here in just a moment. But be aware that you only have until March 1st to file for your homestead exemption, okay, if you bought a house last year. The other caveat to this is you have to have lived in the property as of January 1st. So if you bought a property, say in February this year, you won't be able to apply for the homestead exemption until next year. And basically what the homestead exemption does is it makes the taxable value of your property go down by $50,000. So if the assessed value of your house is $200,000, it will bring it down to $150,000, and you'll be taxed on that $150,000 worth of value rather than $200,000. And I know probably nobody has a $200,000 house here in Florida anymore. It's just an example for math's sake. Here's my beef with the Florida homestead exemption, guys. While it does save you money, it's better than not having it at all. There's a big misconception that your property tax bill cannot go up more than 3% per year if you have a homestead exemption due to the Save Our Homes Act. But that is actually not true, because there is a misunderstanding here that a lot of people don't realize. And the misunderstanding is how the law works is when the Save Our Homes Act, basically what that does is it makes it so that the assessed value of your property cannot increase more than 3% per year. This has nothing to do with how much your tax bill can go up, because first of all, the school portion of your property tax bill is totally exempt from the homestead exemption. So they're always taxing you on the full assessed value when it comes to schools, whether you have kids or not. So basically, say the home's value goes up by 20%, which we're not going to see anymore, but a lot of people did see this during the huge run-up in prices, right? So if somebody had a homestead exemption during this time, then they would have only seen their assessed value go up by 3%, not 20%, which, you know, saves them from having a giant increase in taxes. However, like I said, it only stops your assessed value from going up. It has nothing to do with the millage rate, okay? The millage rate is basically the percentage of tax that your local county and governments charge against your assessed value of your property. And there is no cap or limits on those, and those can be modified at any time by the school district, by your county, by your local city. And from my personal experience, like I shared with you guys in that prior video, I saw a 13% jump in my property tax bill just due to that alone, just due to the fact the millage rates went up so much for the county, the city, and the school district. It was enough to raise my overall tax bill by 13%. So don't be fooled by this narrative that, oh, if you have a homestead exemption, your property tax bill cannot go up more than 3%, because that is not true. Only your assessed value cannot go up more than 3%. So going back to our previous example, you know, if you have a $200,000 evaluation and the homestead exemption brings you down to a $150,000 evaluation, the most assessed value your property could go up by the next year is an additional 3% of $150,000, which would be an additional $4,500. So now you're talking your new assessed value could not be higher than $154,500. And the same would be true for the year after that and the year after that, so long as you have the homestead exemption. But it doesn't stop your local municipality from charging you a much higher millage rate, which can have a way bigger impact on your property tax bill, guys. Go watch that video. I'll link it right here so you guys can see which one I'm talking about. So I go more into depth in that in this video. But the bottom line is, if you haven't filed for the homestead exemption yet and you're entitled to it, make sure you do it. Anything to help you save some money right now is a good thing. And you can just go to your county's website, whichever county you live in the state of Florida, use that website to file your homestead exemption. And there is a potential you could file late. You know, you technically could be considered for a homestead exemption all the way up until the trim notices go out in August, but there's a chance you might not get granted the homestead exemption, you might not get that savings, so might as well do it now, guys. And if you don't do it, then your property will be treated just like any other property, where there's still a cap on how much your assessed value can go up every year, even if you don't have a homestead exemption. So if we go back to the same house, say there's no homestead exemption, okay, $200,000 assessed value, and every year it's capped at going up by 10%, okay? It cannot go up by more than 10%. So the next year that house cannot be assessed at a higher than a $220,000 assessed value, okay? But you see, having that homestead exemption does save you, at least from your assessed value, from getting too high. So I would never tell anybody that it's not worth it to do it. Obviously, I just spent a whole segment on this video telling you that if you qualify, you need to do it, because it will save you money, guys. But just don't believe that when you hear, you know, a lot, even realtors don't get this right because they don't know how this works a lot of times, is that just because you have this does not mean your actual bill cannot go up by more than 3%. That is absolutely false. But having the exemption will at least keep your bill from going up as much as it possibly can. Okay, but there's just other factors outside your control, like what your county and the city and the school district decide to do with the millage rates. That's completely out of your control, which is why this whole system is corrupt to begin with, right? We vote these people in office, they're in control of how much they tax us, and we have no say in the matter. Just pay up or we're gonna foreclose on your property. That's how it works. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't wanna wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.